speaks the Professor Csaba Talay. He teaches in Freie University of Berlin, Semitics. The title of the paper is The Cipher of 1915 and its Impact on Syriac Language and Culture.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. First of all, I'd like to thank Siri for the kind invitation to this conference. It is my first time, and I hope it will be not the last one. In this presentation, I want to draw your attention to the impact of SAIFO, the genocide of 1915 in the Ottoman Empire, on the Syriac language and on its culture. I will concentrate my remarks on the fate of the Syriac Christians of the Ottoman Empire, so the Indian Syrians are not included. Dear colleagues, as far as I know, language has never been in the focus of the SAIFO research. You will find many statements by scholars working on Neo-Aramaic about the decline of this language as a vernacular in the last century caused by the massacres of the SAIFO. However, there is no research or study dedicated to the impact of the genocide on the Syriac language in detail. Until 1915, the Syriac Christians mostly used to live in the eastern vilayets or provinces of the Ottoman Empire, especially Mamur al-Aziz, what is called today El-Azhar, Diyarbakir and Van. In these three provinces, they are natives of one of many Aramaic dialects, by majority. Though we do not possess any exact details about the geographic expansion of the Aramaic language in the Syriac villages and towns of the area. Nevertheless, according to what we know from the survivors of the genocide, we can reconstruct the state of art of Aramaic prior to SAIFO. According to this reconstruction, Aramaic was spoken in many different regional languages, such as the language of Turabdin, these are the regions where they used to live, Yes, the language of Turabdin and that of Diyarbakir, respectively on the western part of the Aramaic-speaking region, and the languages of the districts of Wan, Sirt, Bohdan, Hakkari, and so on in the eastern part of it. The question whether even in Urfa, Orhai, or Edessa, until some extent an Aramaic colloquial existed cannot be answered anymore. The survivors who had been forced by Atatürk's army to leave the city in 1924 and later on settled in Aleppo were Turkish and Armenian speaking. On the other hand, a considerable part of the Syriac Christians in the above-mentioned geographic area was Arabic-speaking, particularly those in the western part of Turabdin and Mardin and in the provinces of Diyarbakir and Sir. You have a man of Arabic dialect still spoken in that area. They spoke dozens of very archaic Arabic dialects. These dialects are of utmost importance for the history of and development of the Arabic language in general. Almost all these dialects disappeared with the SAIFO and share the doom of their Aramaic counterparts. The Muslim speakers of the same and similar dialects were not persecuted or displaced like the Christians, because at that time a division into linguistic identities did not exist. It was not the cultural and linguistic difference which distinguished the victims from their persecutors. The distinction was alone religious. In summer 2008, I discovered an Arabic-speaking village in the mountains about 180 kilometers northeast to Diyarbakir. From our available sources, we know that several villages and towns in the vicinity of this village were inhabited by members of the Syrian Orthodox Church. They very likely were all Arabic speaking, but we are not sure about that. In allusion to the name of the village Sine, one of my informants told me, I quote, "They killed all Christians, only we have been left alive, because we are true Sunni Muslims." Kurdish Sunni Muslims now inhabit the whole region. In Sine, in this village, they call them Bafullah. Bafullah is Kurdish and means of Christian fathers, those whose fathers are Christian. That is, they are descendants of Christians who converted to Islam during the Sayfo instead of the execution. Back to the Aramaic language. Besides of the Syriac Christians, the Jews of the same geographical area as well were often Aramaic speaking. So they were and are part of the Aramaic speaking community. However, contrary to Syriac Christians, the Jews call their Aramaic not Suret or Surayt, they call their language Lishanadin, our language. That means, yes, although very similar dialects, only Christians call or denote their Aramaic language as Surayt or Surat, which means Syriac. Now, I'm not sure whether the Kurds use the same word to denote the language of Jews and Christians, because they use the word Fallah. The Kurds say this is Fallah, or Fallahi means Christian. So I don't know what they say to the language of the Jews, who is the same. If we look back to the history of Aramaic, we then have to admit that the tragedy of 1915 does not mark the beginning of the end of Aramaic as a vernacular of Syriac Christians. In fact, this is a process which already began soon after the advent of Islam in the 7th century. Islam dominated the Middle East as the religion of the ruling class already in 700 CE. Islam came not only with a new religious concept, but also with new lingua sacra to replace Hebrew as the Jewish and Syriac as Christian sacred language in that area. After the conquest of the Middle East through the Islamic armies, Christian and Jewish Aramaic as well came under a repressive religious political system. With downs and ups, during the last 13 centuries, Aramaic almost disappeared from the Middle East. It survived only in mountainous areas on the edge of the Arab world. So we can see a decline of Aramaic through Islamization, Arabization, and later Turkization, Kurdization, and so on and so on, over the centuries until the World War I. Despite this substantial decrease, there were large and continuous Aramaic-speaking areas at the beginning of the 20th century. Prior to the genocide, the Aramaic language was used by hundreds of thousands, Christians and Jews, in the Ottoman Vilayet provinces mentioned above, and beyond them in Mosul, in the northwestern part of Iran, in Azerbaijan. In addition, Aramaic was spoken by Mandeans in surroundings of Basra and Ahwaz, in southern Mesopotamia, in Ma'lula, Baqa, Jubadin, what we call Western Aramaic, in the north to Damascus. But this is a subject our colleagues are going to speak about. While the language of the Mandeans and that of Ma'lula declined until the 90s, maybe under difficult conditions, but in a more natural process, the language of the central area had to experience the massacres, expulsions and displacements in 1915. After the tragedy of Sayfo, Aramaic lost almost all language areas. Only Turaki remained as a somehow monolithic Aramaic area, as I mentioned above. To make it short, we see that the number of Aramaic speakers is declining gradually until the genocide of 1915. But with the sake of the genocide, there was a sharp decline of the speakers. And here we can speak of the extinction of Aramaic in many regions of its part. Language death accompanies humanity throughout its history and is to be seen as natural. In the case of Aramaic, however, language death has been caused by annihilation and genocidal violence against its speakers. It has been murdered, you can say it has been murdered together with them. The Sefer genocide caused a language shift from Aramaic to Kurdish and Turkish in almost all previously Aramaic-speaking regions. And even the survivors, those who could flee and get refuge somewhere, for instance in the Arab countries, but also among Kurds, they faced assimilation and shifted from Aramaic to the host countries' languages, for example Arabic or Turkish and Kurdish and so on. The oral culture of the Syriac Christians, all their medical, historical and literary knowledge passed down only orally unto them, is lost forever. Here we clearly have the case of a linguistic genocide. So there is a continuation of culture and of language. According to almost all experts, linguistic genocide begins already with the prohibition of the use, and I quote, of the use of the language of the group in a daily intercourse or in schools, or the printing and circulation of publications in the language of the group. This exactly was and is the fate of Aramaic in the Republican Turkey after the Sefer until today. This means that we can observe a continuous genocide against the Aramaic language since the Sefer until recently committed by the state. In Turkey, there are today not more than 2,000 speakers of Aramaic in Turkey. They don't get any education in their mother tongue, and according to the UNESCO criteria for minority languages or for endangered languages, Aramaic in Turkey is now definitively endangered of extinction. Now, from my friend Asad mentioned political national movement of the 19th century, which I would like to call now the Uyomo movement, which is usually not taken into account. After centuries of stagnation, a national movement among the Syriac Christians had emerged in the second half of the 19th century beginning. This movement aimed to survive classical Syriac as a modern standard language. Similar, we have parallels in the area, similar to the Arab literary and linguistic renaissance called Nahda in the 19th century. So this is a reaction from Nahda to Syrian Christians who accepted Arabic as their, or used Arabic and began with Arabism, and here we have a Syriac opposition to that. It's an opposition movement. In the cities of Harput, Diyarbakir and Mardin, the protagonists of this movement, among others Naam Faye and Ashur Yusuf, formed groups and circles for national revival among Western Syria especially. They frequently denoted their movement with the old Turkish word intibah, that means revival. It's almost the same like Nahda, intibah. In Syriac it is called Uyomo, to stand up, Uyomo. In this they benefited from the so-called Tanzimat reforms of the Ottoman Empire in the second half of the 19th century. They established schools for the Syriac people, published books and magazines. After the war, all schools were closed, the teachers were killed or forced to flee their homeland, and this little tender movement has been stopped before it could bear fruits among the people, among the Syrians. With this movement, the hopes of the Syriac people for modernization and education and alphabetization died. It couldn't reach all Syriacs. Still, they are illiterate up to 95% in their language, maybe more than 95%, but they are illiterate. So the second aspect, what happened to these people. The language cannot be seen separate from the culture of a nation. Language and culture form the two sides of one medal. Therefore, we can extend the explanation of the direct impact of Sefer on Aramaic from linguistic genocide mentioned before to cultural genocide, more generally. The official International Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide of the United Nations from 1948 doesn't include the genocidal crimes against language and culture of the people. But during the preparations of the genocide paragraph, even the issue of the language was discussed in Article 3, which at the end was refused by some powerful countries and didn't find its way into the final draft. Article 3 states, any deliberate act committed with intent to destroy the language, religion or culture of a national, racial or religious group on grounds of national or racial origin and religious belief, such as prohibiting the use, I mentioned it before, and destroying or preventing the use of libraries, museums, schools, historical monuments, places of worship or other cultural institutions and objects of the group. 16 countries in the UN General Assembly rejected this article and prevented the inclusion of cultural genocide in the Genocide Convention, which was then adopted on November 9, 1948. Among the opponents, there were the United States, Soviet Union, Great Britain in particular, because they are own history. What I have presented above covers all the criteria for cultural genocide explicitly mentioned in the first paragraph of the Article 3. The language forms the pillar of each culture. Besides the language and the oral culture of the victims, in the sake of the whole cultural heritage of the Syriacs has been targeted. Unique cultural assets such as religious institutions and monasteries and churches have been destroyed. Libraries with ancient manuscripts and invaluable evangeliaries have been plundered and burned. This would cover the second paragraph of this article of the Genocide Convention. Based on the definition of this paragraph in following, I am going to come with two dimensions of genocidal acts against Syriac cultural institutions. The first is the destruction of churches and places of worship. Between 1915 and 1918, the Christian villages were pillaged and their churches destroyed. The cult objects and liturgical books were plundered. There are countless examples from hundreds of previously Christian villages and towns for this. The churches have been ruined or turned to purposes other than intended. Several of them have been turned to mosques. Others are used as residential buildings or as stables and animal barns. We can mention two important Christian buildings, namely the residence of the Patriarch of the Assyrian Church of the East in Kochanes, in Hakkari. It is still a ruin, and it has been used for a long time as a stable, and I got pictures from the 60s when it was a stable, 68 from Helgant. The Patriarchate is the Patriarchate of the Syriac Catholic Church in Mardin, which now houses the municipal museum. So just only two, we have hundreds or maybe more. While the fate of church buildings and monasteries is obvious and can still be viewed today, it is impossible to reconstruct the doom of libraries and their contents. For instance, we possess no information about the great library of the famous Metropolitan of the Chaldean Church in Siirt, Madhat Daisher, who has been brutally murdered in 1915. Many of the books and manuscripts, Afem Barsom is listing in his 3 catalogues of Syriac manuscripts of Toradin and the 2 famous monasteries, have been lost. Not only monasteries had large libraries, but also almost in all villages with Syriac population, there were churches, clerics and laymen who had books and unique manuscripts. What happened to all these library monuments on the Syriac culture? To illustrate this again, I would like to come with 2 records about how the perpetrators treated Syriac books. In the first case, it is Helmut Ritter, the famous German Orientalist, who reports of the burning of Syriac manuscripts in the Mariakov Church of Nisibin, or Nisibis. Helmut Ritter, who after retirement had devoted himself completely to Royal Aramaic studies, served during World War I as interpreter for Kolmar von der Goltz, the German commander-in-chief of the Ottoman Mesopotamian army in 1915. On his way from Istanbul to Baghdad in fall 1915, he came to Nisibin in November, and in a letter dated November 23, 1915, from Mosul, he reports that the Christians, that the claims that only Armenians are killed is not correct. The Christian Syrians are also murdered, and he says also that in an old church, that is the Moryakov church in Nisibin, there were 40 to 50 Syriac manuscripts put together and set on fire. As a second report comes from Sorino, Aberli, or Beth Svirino, one of the major villages in the eastern Turatin. I recorded reflections about the history of this village in Berlin in March 2014. The informant is a native of Sorino and now priest of the Syriac Orthodox Church Moravian community in Berlin, Elias Posman, born 1942. He reports of 4 or 5 incidents happened in his village, in his own village. I think the books mentioned from this village in the catalogue of Afrem Barshom are more than 100 pages. So a lot of books, and here he mentions 3 incidents. One of them, he mentions 2 private libraries, how they have been destroyed, the bookshelves and the books have been spread on the ground and trampled with the animals, or others have been shot and burned down. And then he says that they in Sorino had a very, very expensive, very good, valuable Fanpito with the books of hours for the annual cycle for the Châteauneuf, and it was very big, 1.5 meters long and the width of 0.5 meters, a very big one, and was made of thick paper. And it was so heavy that when they took it from one into other church, they had to load it on animals. Or they had 4 people taking this from one church to the other. So the Muslims, the Kurdish Muslims, found this book, important book, Fanpito, brought it, put it as a target and fired with guns on this Fanpito until it was completely riddled and destroyed. The last report is from the library, not the last, yes, both. Library of Mardover Church. This is the main church of this village, Mardover Church. It has been destroyed. All books have been taken and cast away on the waste dump of the Galori neighborhood. All these books were set on fire and burned. Those books that do not burn did not burn. They were shot with bullets and destroyed. The last one, the most important treasure of the village was the collection of ancient evangeliaries in the Mardover Church. In Sorino there were 12 very valuable illuminated gospel books that were written with gold ink on leather. For these evangeliaries, the villagers had timbered a bookcase that had been immersed in the wall between the altar and baptistry of the Mardover Church. Together with them, precious liturgical vessels of the church were hidden. The wall was then plastered so that no one could suspect something behind it. The villagers did these provisions to protect and hide their most valuable treasure from the Kurdish Muslim raiders. Unfortunately, an archdeacon of the church had converted to Islam during the Saiful. He betrayed this hiding place to the Muslims. They came and opened the wall and took out the evangeliaries and other liturgical objects. It is not known what has become of these books. So it's a little bit, this story of these books goes longer until the Kurdish uprising and so on, but I will stop this here, we don't have the time. Just to come to an end. These 2 cases of criminal acts, namely the destruction of places of worship and cultural institutions, and the systematic destruction of cultural goods, fulfill clearly the elements of the cultural genocide formulated in paragraph 2 of the above cited article 3 of the Genocide Convention. To sum up in 1 sentence or 1.5, the violence did not stop by killings and other atrocities against the Syriac Christians. However, it targeted their language, their cultural heritage, and destroyed their cultural monuments. And this is nothing else than a genocidal act, and it has to be called genocide. I finished here, but allow me just to jump to the modern times and quote, to end with a quote from a patriarch who sent a letter somewhere. He says, among others, the Kurds have forcibly taken many of our churches and convents. They constantly attack our virgins, brides, and women, forcing them to turn Muslims. The Turks are worse. They do not protect us, demand military taxes, poll tax. Also, the Kurds take our money, for they consider us slaves. We mentioned the word zirkun, slaves. Now, such being our condition, we beseech your mightiness, for the sake of Jesus, his baptism and cross, either to free us from such a state or to procure us a remedy. You can now imagine in which time this letter has been written. It could be from a bishop from Mosul or from the surrounding areas of today, or it could be from the first genocide we spoke about. So it is exactly even before the state war. It was from 1868 from the Catholicos Patriarch of the Syrian and Eastern Syrian Church to the Russian Emperor. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much to Professor Taleb for this presentation rich of information about this sad problem of history, also of today. We have some minutes for questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sharma, for depicting the picture of what I would describe as one of sadness and grief, of course, for what has been happening. I just have one brief comment, and that is, I had occasion to publish a few letters, not a few letters, sent by Jeremiah Shamir to Edward Zachau, the German scholar. I published them in two separate articles, and it is my intention to publish the whole manuscript in a book which I'm going to call From Mosul to Berlin. Very topical, seeing that they were sent from Mosul, and we know what's happening in Mosul. What I wanted to say is that one gets the impression from those letters that things were planned and for right of the Christians, barring very few discriminatory acts. Otherwise, life was going on. Jeremiah Shamir was able to write lots of, and buy lots of books and manuscripts and send them to Zachau. Do you think the picture has changed dramatically from 1840, when Jeremiah Shamir was writing to Zachau, until his death in 1890 or 95?
Yes, this is another thing, but you know that many things happened after these letters, because you forgot Badr Khan massacres in 1842 till 1847. You forgot the massacres of 1895. You forgot the problems, but this is only of the eastern part. You forgot the so-called Mirekor expansion, the Kurdish Mir from Rawatus, who captured all the area, killed thousands of Christians, especially in the Nineveh plain and the Yazidis, together with the Badr-Khanis, with the Jizra emirs. So it can't have been so calm. But you know, I spoke about this political movement too. So there was some place, some space to be active in that time, because you couldn't just flee. You would work like it's mentioned in the Bible before the flood came. You know, everybody, they were doing, working, marrying, and so on. So it's the same. It's even today in Mosul. It may be 10 days before they invaded it. People would say, "Yeah, we are living here. Why should we go? It is nice. We are living our life. Why should we leave our country?" So it is the same at that time. Yes.
Just a tiny question. Just a question, Dr. Shalbo. How come that the Armenians and the Christians who were massacred in 1915, they got refuge in Iraq? There were many Armenians, those Christians from our area in the north. They came back to the place and got protection from the Arabs, which means that, well, how do you explain that? So from the Muslim Arab?
Yes, no, that's correct. Some survivors arrived the way to some Arab tribes. It's especially, you can say, the Tayyip tribe in northern Mesopotamia, who helped them to bring them to Sinjar, to the Abbas of the Yazidis.